Sadly, 2017 has been a year where we've been hearing constantly about injuries and deaths due to firearms, largely in adults, but what about in children and teenagers? In our July 2017 issue of Pediatrics, Drs. Catherine Fowler, Linda Dahlberg, and colleagues from the Centers for Disease Control and the University of Texas in Austin published an article on firearm injuries in children and teenagers. What made this article so heavily read was not just that it provided incidence data on firearm injuries in young people, but it provided trend data from 2002 to 2014 and provided information regarding the circumstances and intent of firearm injuries in children and teenagers, as well as demographic data as to where these injuries are occurring. Link to this article and learn more, but please check out Figure 1 and Figure 2 of this important article. Figure 1 shows maps of the United States and notes firearm deaths over the past 5 years, where they're occurring in terms of the rate of these deaths by homicide, by suicide, and overall firearm injuries. And figure number 2 shows the trend data from 2002 to 2014. Well, the promising news is that unintentional firearm injuries in children appear to be declining over time. Homicide rates seem to increase over the first 7 years of this study and then declined over the past 7 years, but suicide rates did just the opposite. What does all this information mean, and what can we do about it as pediatricians? We asked injury prevention specialist Dr. Elliot Nelson from the University of Vermont to weigh in with an accompanying commentary. Check out this commentary because it'll note that sadly, firearm injury rates have continued to increase since the authors of the Anchor study stopped collecting data in 2014, but also notes our important role as pediatricians and what we need to do a better job educating families about firearm prevention strategies, such as safe storage of firearms in homes that have firearms, and what else we can do at an individual patient level, as well as at a community and statewide level. Set your sights on this article and this commentary, learn more, and then implement it in the year 2018 so the incidence of firearm injuries and deaths to children, teenagers, and even adults decline thanks to the prevention strategies that we can implement as pediatricians. In 2016, the American Academy of Pediatrics updated its policy on SIDS and other sleep-related infant deaths. This policy, which we published in our journal, made a number of recommendations, and one new recommendation was that infants should room share, not bed share, with their parents for the first 6 months of life and ideally for the first year of life. Well, not every parent may have been as happy with this recommendation as the task force might have hoped, let alone pediatricians. And the question was, what would room sharing do to sleep outcomes for infants, maybe even for parents? Well, to look at the infant question, Dr. Ian Paul from Penn State and colleagues, co-authors from institutions around the country, tapped into an interventional obesity study in which parents who enrolled their children in this study kept sleep diaries at 4, 9, 12, and 30 months of their child's age, looking at where they were sleeping and how they were sleeping. The authors of this particular study, Dr. Paul and colleagues, divided the infants into 3 categories. Early independent sleepers, meaning they were in a crib in their own room before 4 months of age. Late independent sleepers, meaning they were in a crib in their own room between 4 and 9 months of age. And the room sharers, who stayed in the parents' room after 9 months of age. The results of the sleep surveys indicated that the early independent sleepers were sleeping longer overall overnight and for longer durations of sleep than the later independent sleepers, who still were sleeping longer and for longer durations, statistically significant, than the room sharers. In fact, the room sharers were 4 times as likely to be found in bed with their parents, which is not a good thing compared to the early or later independent sleepers. So does this mean that we're not going to pay attention to the AAP's policy on SIDS and other sleep-related infant deaths? Not at all. In fact, we asked for a commentary that co-authors of this policy, Drs. Rachel Moon and Fern Houck from the University of Virginia, weigh in with their response to this study and how it relates to the overall policy from the Academy. Drs. Moon and Houck point out that even the room sharers, while they were sleeping less overall, were still getting adequate amounts of sleep that fell within the range of normal, and even their durations of sleep fell within the range of normal. Perhaps the issue was not the total amount of sleep that the early independent sleepers were getting compared to the room sharer, but more the sleep routines that the room sharers had, which were not quite as good as those early and later independent sleepers. So, What should we recommend? I recommend that you keep your eyes wide open and stay awake and continue to watch studies that provide evidence that will shape and reshape AAP policies so that updates will continue to occur. For the moment, we continue to have that AAP policy, but keep an eye on our journal and other journal for other studies that will take a look at strong evidence that may modify that policy in the months and years to come.